Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Okay, so where do I even start? I guess I'll just start at the beginning. It's still so hard to even think about, let alone put into words. This whole thing with Tinder, it messed me up. Bad. I was going through a rough patch. Classic post-breakup, feeling sorry for myself, needed a distraction kind of thing. My friend Sarah kept telling me to get on Tinder, said it would be a fun way to meet new people, get my mind off things. I was hesitant. I am not really a dating app person. I prefer meeting people in real life, you know. But I was also lonely and desperate for something, anything, to break the monotony. So I downloaded it, swiped through a bunch of profiles, mostly guys looking for hookups or bragging about their cars and gym selfies. It was pretty much what I expected. But then I matched with him, Liam. His profile was different. No shirtless pics, no obvious attempts to impress. Just a couple of candid shots, one of him hiking, another of him playing guitar. His bio was simple. Looking for someone to explore the city with. He seemed normal, refreshing even. We started chatting, and it was easy. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything, our favorite books, our dream vacations, our biggest fears. He listened, really listened, to what I had to say. It felt real. After a few days of talking online, we decided to meet up. We went for coffee at this little cafe downtown. He was even more attractive in person, with these kind, hazel eyes and a warm smile. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We laughed, we shared stories, we just clicked. It was like I had known him forever. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Dates, movies, walks in the park. He was everything I thought I wanted in a guy. He was attentive, supportive, and made me feel like I was the only girl in the world. I fell hard, and I fell fast. Looking back, I can see the red flags. They were there, subtle at first, but they were there. He was always a little too eager to please, a little too quick to agree with everything I said. He mirrored my interests and opinions so perfectly that it felt almost uncanny. And he always wanted to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. I chalked it up to him being caring, but it was the first sign of his controlling nature. Things started to get weird a few weeks into the relationship. He started isolating me from my friends. He'd make little comments about them, subtly criticizing their choices or their personalities. He'd say things like, "Are you sure Sarah is really your friend? She seems kind of jealous of you." Or, "Don't you think Mark is a little too flirty?" He made me question my friendships, made me feel like I couldn't trust anyone but him. Then came the demands. He started expecting me to spend every waking moment with him. He'd get upset if I made plans without him, even if it was just to grab lunch with my mom. He'd accuse me of not caring about him, of putting my friends and family before him. He made me feel guilty for having a life outside of our relationship. The gaslighting was constant. He'd twist my words, deny things he had said, and make me feel like I was losing my mind. I'd confront him about something he did, and he'd turn it around on me, making me feel like I was the one who was wrong. He'd say things like, "You read too sensitive," or "You reimagining things," or "I never said that." I started doubting my own memory, my own sanity. The jealousy was insane. He was constantly accusing me of cheating on him, even though I had given him no reason to doubt me. He'd go through my phone when I was sleeping, check my social media, interrogate me about every male coworker or acquaintance I had. He made me feel like I was constantly under surveillance. It escalated from there. The verbal abuse became more frequent and more intense. He'd call me names, criticize my appearance, and belittle my accomplishments. He made me feel worthless, like I was nothing without him. He convinced me that no one else would ever love me, that I was lucky to have him. Then came the physical stuff. It started small, a push, a shove, a grab. Then it escalated to slaps, punches, and kicks. He'd always apologize afterwards, swear it would never happen again. He'd cry, beg for forgiveness, and tell me how much he loved me. And I, being the naive fool that I was, believed him. I wanted to believe him. I was trapped in a cycle of abuse. He'd hurt me, apologize, and then love bomb me with affection and attention. I'd start to feel hopeful, thinking that things were finally getting better, and then the cycle would start all over again. I was isolated, broken, and terrified. I didn't know who to turn to. He had completely isolated me from my friends and family. I was ashamed of what was happening, and I didn't want anyone to know. I was afraid of what he would do if I tried to leave. One night, it got really bad. We were arguing about something stupid, and he just snapped. He pinned me against the wall, screaming in my face, telling me how worthless I was. He punched me, kicked me, and choked me until I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. Somehow, I managed to break free and run out of the house. I ran as fast as I could, not knowing where I was going, just wanting to get away. I ended up at a gas station, sobbing and shaking. The cashier called the police. They took me to the hospital, where they treated my injuries and took a statement. They arrested Liam, and he was charged with domestic violence. That was the beginning of the end. The legal process was long and difficult, but I had the support of the police, the hospital staff, and a domestic violence advocacy group. They helped me get a restraining order against Liam and find a safe place to stay. It's been a few years since then, and I am still healing. The scars, both physical and emotional, are still there. I have nightmares, panic attacks, and trust issues. I am in therapy, working through the trauma and trying to rebuild my life. I haven't been on Tinder since. The thought of it makes me sick to my stomach. I am afraid of meeting someone new, afraid of repeating the same mistakes. I am afraid of trusting anyone again. I am sharing this story because I want other people to know that they're not alone. Domestic violence is a real and serious issue, and it can happen to anyone. If you're in an abusive relationship, please reach out for help. There are people who care about you and want to support you. You don't have to go through this alone. I am still struggling, but I am getting better. I am learning to love myself again, to trust my instincts, and to set healthy boundaries. I am learning to forgive myself for the mistakes I made and to move on with my life. It's a long and difficult journey, but I am determined to make it. I am a survivor, and I am not going to let Liam define me. I am going to heal, and I am going to thrive. And hopefully, one day, I'll be able to trust again. I've used Tinder for years. Mostly, it's been a fairly normal experience. A few decent dates, a couple of awkward encounters, and a whole lot of swiping. But there was this one time, a few summers ago, that completely changed my perspective on online dating. It taught me a brutal lesson about how easily we can misjudge people, and how crucial it is to pay attention to those little gut feelings we often dismiss. It taught me to always be aware of the potential for darkness lurking behind a carefully constructed online persona. I was in a weird place, emotionally. I'd just gone through a messy breakup, feeling vulnerable and honestly, a little lonely. I wasn't really looking for a relationship, more like a distraction, a way to feel like I wasn't completely invisible. I re-downloaded Tinder, revamped my profile with some new pictures, and started swiping. That's when I matched with Liam. His profile was intriguing. He had this brooding, artistic vibe. Photos of him playing guitar, posing in front of graffiti art, and one of him hiking in the mountains. His bio was equally captivating, talking about his passion for music, his love of nature, and his desire to connect with someone on a deeper level. He seemed intelligent, sensitive, and maybe a little bit damaged, which, let's be honest, was exactly the type of guy I was drawn to at that particular moment in my life. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He was witty, thoughtful, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything, our favorite books, our dreams, our fears. He shared some pretty personal stuff about his struggles with anxiety and his difficult relationship with his family. It felt like we were building a real connection, even though we hadn't met in person yet. After a few days of nonstop texting, he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant at first. I usually waited longer before meeting someone from Tinder, but there was something about Liam that made me want to throw caution to the wind. He seemed so genuine, so different from the guys I dated in the past. Plus, I was eager to get out of the house and do something, anything, to take my mind off my ex. We agreed to meet for coffee at a small cafe near my apartment. I spent way too long getting ready, agonizing over what to wear, trying to strike that perfect balance between casual and cute. As I was heading out the door, I texted a friend to let her know where I was going and who I was meeting. just in case. When I arrived at the cafe, Liam was already there, sitting at a table by the window. He looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He had this intense gaze and a disarming smile. My initial nervousness melted away as soon as he stood up and gave me a warm hug. The first hour of our date was amazing. We laughed, we shared stories, and we discovered even more common interests. He was charming, engaging, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. He listened intently, made eye contact, and asked thoughtful questions. He even complimented my writing, which was a huge deal for me. I found myself completely captivated by him. But then, things started to shift. He started talking about his ex-girlfriend, who, according to him, was crazy and manipulative. He went on and on about how she had wronged him, how she had betrayed his trust, and how she had left him emotionally scarred. At first, I was sympathetic. I'd been there before. But the more he talked, the more uncomfortable I became. His anger seemed disproportionate to the situation, and he kept referring to her in these really harsh, demeaning terms. Then, he started asking me some really personal questions about my past relationships, my insecurities, and my biggest fears. Again, it started out innocently enough, but the questions became increasingly intrusive and probing. It felt like he was trying to dig into my deepest wounds, like he was trying to find some kind of weakness to exploit. I started to feel the subtle unease creeping in, a sense that something wasn't quite right. His eyes seemed to darken, his smile seemed to fade, and his energy seemed to shift from warm and inviting to cold and calculating. He suggested we go for a walk in the park. I hesitated, but I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. Plus, I was still trying to rationalize my growing discomfort, telling myself that I was just being overly sensitive. As we walked through the park, the conversation took an even darker turn. He started talking about his fascination with true crime, specifically cases involving violence against women. He described the details of these crimes in graphic detail, and he seemed almost excited by them. I was completely horrified. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he kept bringing it back to the same disturbing topics. I started to feel genuinely afraid. I realized that I was alone in a park with a man I barely knew, a man who seemed to have a disturbingly twisted mind. I made an excuse to leave, saying I had to meet a friend. He didn't try to stop me, but he gave me this unsettling look, like he knew I was lying. He walked me back to the entrance of the park, and as I turned to leave, he said, "I had a really great time. We should do this again sometime." I forced a smile and mumbled something about being busy. I practically ran to my apartment, locking the door behind me and collapsing onto the couch, shaking with fear. I immediately blocked Liam's number and deleted him from all my social media accounts. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, replaying the date in my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. The next day, I did some online research about Liam. I couldn't find much, but I did discover that he had a history of making inappropriate comments on social media, particularly towards women. I also found a few posts from women who claimed he had been harassing them online. I felt sick to my stomach. I had been so close to putting myself in a really dangerous situation. I realized that I had been blinded by my own vulnerability and my desire for connection. I had ignored all the red flags, all the warning signs, because I wanted to believe that Liam was the person he had presented himself to be online. That experience taught me a lot of things. It taught me that online dating can be a minefield, filled with people who are not who they seem to be. It taught me that it's crucial to be cautious, to do your research, and to trust your instincts. But most importantly, it taught me to always be aware of the potential for darkness lurking behind a carefully constructed online persona. It taught me that people can be incredibly skilled at manipulating others, at hiding their true intentions, and at preying on the vulnerable. I still use Tinder, but I'm much more cautious now. I take my time getting to know people online before meeting them in person. I always meet in public places, and I always let a friend know where I am and who I'm with. I pay close attention to red flags, and I don't hesitate to end a conversation or a date if I feel uncomfortable or unsafe. That experience with Liam changed me. It made me more aware, more vigilant, and more protective of myself. It taught me that it's okay to be skeptical, to be cautious, and to prioritize my own safety, even if it means missing out on a potential connection. It taught me that it's better to be safe than sorry, especially when it comes to online dating. It taught me, above all, to trust my gut, because sometimes That little voice inside is the only thing that can protect you from the darkness. It taught me to always be aware of the potential for darkness lurking behind a carefully constructed online persona. I used to think all those Tinder horror stories were made up, exaggerated for clicks, or just a product of bad luck mixed with terrible judgment. I'd scroll past them on Reddit, chuckle at the ridiculousness of the situations, and think, that would never happen to me. I mean, I wasn't exactly a wide-eyed newbie. I'd been using the app on and off for years, had my fair share of awkward dates, and knew how to spot the obvious red flags. I considered myself a seasoned swiper, immune to the pitfalls of online dating. Then Liam happened. It started like any other Tinder match. We exchanged a few messages, found some common interests, indie music, hiking, obscure documentaries, and decided to meet up for coffee. His profile was pretty standard, a few pictures of him hiking, one with his dog, and a bio that mentioned his love for craft beer and travel. He seemed normal, maybe a little introverted, but definitely not a creep. Our first date was fine. He was a bit quieter than I expected, but we managed to have a decent conversation. There weren't any immediate alarm bells, no weird vibes, just a slightly awkward but ultimately harmless encounter. I wasn't blown away, but I also wasn't completely turned off. He texted me later that night, saying he had a good time and would like to see me again. I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was feeling it, but I also didn't want to be rude. Plus, I was kind of bored and hadn't met anyone interesting in a while. So I said yes. That's where things started to get weird. Our second date was at his apartment. He suggested we cook dinner together, which seemed like a reasonable next step. His place was small, a bit messy, but nothing out of the ordinary. He made pasta with a simple tomato sauce, and we talked about our jobs and families. Again, everything seemed normal, but as the night went on, he started acting different. He became more intense, his eyes fixated on me in a way that made me uncomfortable. He started asking increasingly personal questions, probing into my past relationships, my insecurities, my deepest fears. It felt like an interrogation rather than a conversation. I tried to steer the conversation to lighter topics, but he kept bringing it back to the dark stuff. He seemed fascinated by my vulnerabilities, almost like he was trying to unravel me. I started to feel trapped, like I couldn't escape his gaze. After dinner, he put on some music, a strange, unsettling mix of ambient electronic and industrial noise. It wasn't music I would ever choose to listen to, but I figured it was just a matter of taste. Then he started dancing, a slow, deliberate movement that felt more like a ritual than a dance. He moved closer to me, his eyes never leaving mine, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I made an excuse about having to get home early and quickly said goodbye. He walked me to the door, his hand lingering a little too long on my arm. As I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and unease. Liam texted me constantly, sending me bizarre messages filled with cryptic poetry and philosophical musings. He seemed obsessed with me, like I was the only thing on his mind. I tried to ignore him, hoping he would get the hint, but he wouldn't stop. Then he started showing up unannounced. First, it was outside my work. I'd walk out at the end of the day, and he'd be standing there, waiting for me. He'd say he just wanted to say hello, but his presence made me deeply uncomfortable. I started taking different routes home, hoping to avoid him. Then he started showing up outside my apartment. I'd look out my window and see him standing across the street, just watching. He never approached me, never said anything, just stood there, a silent, looming presence. I started feeling like I was living in a horror movie. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I considered calling the police, but I didn't have any concrete evidence that he was doing anything illegal. He hadn't threatened me, hadn't physically harmed me. He was just being creepy. I confided in my best friend, Sarah, who listened to my story with growing concern. She urged me to block him on all social media, change my phone number, and file a restraining order if necessary. She also suggested I start carrying pepper spray for protection. I took her advice and blocked Liam on everything. I changed my phone number and started carrying pepper spray in my purse. I felt a little safer, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, watching me. A few weeks passed, and I started to relax a little. I hadn't seen or heard from Liam, and I began to think that maybe he had finally given up. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe he was just a harmless weirdo who had gotten a little too attached. Then one night, I came home from work and found my apartment door unlocked. My heart leaped into my throat. I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and silent. I fumbled for the light switch and flicked it on. What I saw next made my blood run cold. Liam was standing in the middle of my living room, surrounded by candles. He was wearing a long, black robe and had a strange symbol painted on his forehead. He looked like he was about to perform some kind of ritual. "Liam, what the hell are you doing here?" I stammered, my voice trembling. He turned to face me, his eyes glazed over and unfocused. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice low and hypnotic. "We have important work to do." I tried to run, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You can't leave," he said. "You're part of the prophecy." I struggled against his grasp, screaming for help, but no one could hear me. My apartment was isolated, and my neighbors were all heavy sleepers. He dragged me to the center of the room, forcing me to kneel in front of him. He began chanting in a language I didn't understand, his voice growing louder and more intense. The candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I was terrified. I had no idea what he was planning to do, but I knew it couldn't be good. I closed my eyes and prayed for it to end. Then, suddenly, there was a loud crash. The door burst open, and Sarah stormed into the room, wielding a baseball bat. She charged at Liam, swinging the bat with all her might. Liam stumbled backward, momentarily stunned. I seized the opportunity and broke free from his grasp. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward Sarah, who was now engaged in a fierce struggle with Liam. Together, we managed to overpower him and tie him up with some rope I found in the closet. We called the police, who arrived a few minutes later and took Liam into custody. It turned out that Liam was a member of a cult that believed I was the chosen one, destined to play a key role in their apocalyptic rituals. He had been stalking me for weeks, gathering information about my life and planning his grand entrance. The police found a treasure trove of disturbing evidence in his apartment, including photos of me, ritualistic objects, and a detailed plan outlining his intentions. He was charged with kidnapping, stalking, and several other offenses. I was traumatized by the experience, but I was also incredibly grateful to Sarah for saving my life. If she hadn't shown up when she did, I don't know what would have happened to me. I moved to a new city, changed my name, and went into therapy to deal with the trauma. I still have nightmares about Liam, but I'm slowly starting to heal. I haven't used Tinder since. I used to think those Tinder horror stories were made up, but now I know they're all too real. The internet can be a dangerous place, and you never really know who's hiding behind those carefully curated profiles. Now, I'm hyper-aware of the risks, the potential for danger lurking behind a seemingly normal profile. I check backgrounds, reverse image search, and generally stalk my matches before even considering a first date. It might seem extreme, but after what happened with Liam, I can't afford to be too careful. The thought of going through that again, the terror, the violation, it's enough to keep me offline for good. Or at least, until I develop a foolproof system for identifying and avoiding the Liams of the world. Because let's be honest, the dating world isn't exactly brimming with safe options, is it? It's just a matter of finding the least terrifying one. Maybe I'll stick to dogs. They're usually pretty good at sniffing out bad vibes. Okay, so, I'm not usually one to share personal stuff like this online, but I feel like I need to get this off my chest, and maybe, just maybe, it'll stop someone else from going through what I did. This is about Tinder. It's a long story, and it's definitely a cautionary tale. I'm even using a fake name, so let's just call me Sarah. I was in a pretty low place a couple of years ago, freshly out of a long-term relationship, feeling lost and lonely, and just wanting some kind of connection, even if it was just temporary. Everyone kept telling me to get on Tinder, saying it was a fun way to meet people and get back out there. So I caved. I made a profile, put up some flattering pictures, wrote a witty bio, and started swiping. At first, it was kind of fun. I matched with a few guys, had some polite conversations, but nothing really clicked. Then I matched with Ethan. He was different. He had this cool, artistic vibe in his profile pictures, black and white photos, landscapes, that kind of thing. His bio was short and intriguing, looking for someone to explore the city with. He seemed genuine, not just some guy looking for a hookup. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was intelligent, funny, and actually seemed interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything, Our favorite books, our dreams, our fears. It was refreshing. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant at first, but he seemed so nice, so genuine. I agreed. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. He was even more attractive in person. He had this intense gaze and a warm smile that made me feel instantly comfortable. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. It felt like I had known him forever. It was like something out of a movie. I was hooked. We started seeing each other regularly. We went to art galleries, explored hidden cafes, and took long walks in the park. He introduced me to new music, new books, new ways of seeing the world. I fell hard and fast. He seemed to feel the same way. He told me he had never felt this way about anyone before. He showered me with compliments and affection. It was intoxicating. Looking back, there were red flags, subtle at first, but they were there. He was always a bit secretive about his past. He wouldn't talk much about his family or his friends. He always deflected when I asked about his job. He said he was a freelance photographer, but he never seemed to be working. He always had time for me. He also had this possessive streak that I initially found endearing. He wanted to spend all his time with me. He got jealous if I made plans with other people. He wanted to know where I was and who I was with at all times. At first, I thought it was just because he cared about me so much, but it slowly started to feel suffocating. Then things started to get weird. He started asking me strange questions, probing questions about my past relationships, my insecurities, my fears. He seemed to want to know everything about me, even the things I didn't want to share. He would use this information against me later, twisting my words and making me feel guilty for things I had done in the past. He started isolating me from my friends. He would make me feel bad for spending time with them, saying that I was neglecting him. He would create drama and arguments whenever I had plans with other people. Eventually, I stopped seeing my friends altogether. I was completely dependent on him. The emotional abuse escalated. He would constantly criticize me, telling me I wasn't good enough, that I was lucky to have him. He would gaslight me, making me question my own sanity. He would deny things he had said or done, making me feel like I was crazy. I started to believe everything he said. I thought I was worthless, that I would never find anyone else who would love me. He also started controlling my finances. He convinced me to quit my job, saying that he would take care of me. He said he wanted me to focus on my passions, on things that made me happy. But really, he just wanted to control me. He would give me an allowance each week, barely enough to cover my basic expenses. He would scrutinize every purchase I made, making me feel guilty for spending money on myself. I was trapped. I was completely isolated, emotionally abused, and financially dependent on him. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to get out. I was scared. He had convinced me that I was worthless, that no one would believe me if I tried to tell them what was happening. One night, he went too far. We were arguing about something trivial, and he lost his temper. He grabbed me by the arm, his grip tight and painful. He started yelling at me, his face contorted with rage. I was terrified. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. He pushed me against the wall, his eyes burning into mine. In that moment, I realized I had to get out. I didn't know what he was capable of, but I knew I couldn't stay with him any longer. I managed to break free from his grip and ran out of the apartment. I didn't stop running until I reached a gas station a few blocks away. I called the police. The police took me to a safe house, where I spent the next few days recovering. I was traumatized, but I was also relieved to be safe. I told the police everything that had happened. They launched an investigation, but because there was not enough physical evidence, they could not take any further action. It took me a long time to heal from the emotional scars he left. I went to therapy, talked to my friends and family, and slowly started to rebuild my life. It was a long and difficult process, but I eventually came out stronger on the other side. The whole experience changed me. I learned to trust my instincts, to set boundaries, and to prioritize my own well-being. I learned that I am worthy of love and respect, and that I deserve to be treated with kindness and compassion. Most importantly, I learned that I am not alone, and that there are people who care about me and want to help. I'm sharing this story as a cautionary tale. Tinder can be a fun way to meet people, but it can also be a dangerous place. There are people out there who are looking to take advantage of others, who are looking to control and manipulate. Be careful who you trust. Pay attention to the red flags. And if something doesn't feel right, get out. Your safety and well-being are the most important things. I will probably never use Tinder again after that whole experience. I'm now much more cautious when I am interacting with people online, and I have made the decision to only meet people face to face, in real life. If you're in a similar situation, please reach out for help. There are resources available to support you. You don't have to go through this alone. You are not alone. I hope my story helps someone. Please be careful out there. Protect yourself. And remember, you are worthy of love and respect. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So I need to tell someone about this. I haven't really been able to properly explain it to anyone I know because, well, they wouldn't believe me. Or they'd think I was crazy. So here goes. It all started, predictably, on Tinder. I was bored, a little lonely, and swiping through profiles like it was some kind of warped game. You know the drill. See a face, read a bio, swipe left or right based on a millisecond's worth of judgment. That's how I came across Liam. His profile was pretty standard. Decent-looking guy, maybe late 20s, a couple of pictures of him hiking, one with a dog, and a bio that said something about loving craft beer and indie music. Nothing that screamed serial killer or total weirdo. So I swiped right. We matched almost instantly. Now, I'm not usually one for diving headfirst into conversations, but Liam seemed engaging. He wasn't just throwing out generic questions or cheesy pickup lines. He actually seemed interested in getting to know me. We talked about our favorite books, our travel dreams, even our fears. It was refreshing. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up. He suggested a new bar downtown, one I hadn't been to before. I looked it up online, and it seemed like a pretty chill place. So I agreed. I told a friend where I was going, as always, and sent her a picture of Liam's profile. Safety first, right? The night of the date, I was actually kind of excited. It had been a while since I felt genuinely interested in someone I met online. I got ready, feeling a little nervous, but mostly optimistic. I even put on my good date dress, the one that always seems to make me feel confident. When I got to the bar, Liam was already there, waiting at a table near the back. He looked even better in person. He had this easy smile and a relaxed demeanor that instantly put me at ease. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely seemed to be listening to what I had to say. There weren't any awkward silences or forced conversations. It just flowed. It was probably one of the best first dates I'd ever been on. As the night went on, though, I started noticing some odd things. Little things that I initially brushed off as quirks or maybe just my imagination. For instance, he kept glancing at the door, almost like he was expecting someone. And he had this habit of repeating phrases under his breath, barely audible, like he was trying to remind himself of something. But the biggest thing was his eyes. They were a striking shade of blue, almost unnaturally so. And when he looked at me, it felt like he was seeing right through me, like he knew all my secrets. It was unnerving, but also strangely alluring. Despite these little quirks, I was still having a good time. We decided to call it a night around midnight. He walked me to my car, and we shared a quick but intense kiss. I drove home feeling giddy and excited to see him again. The next day, Liam texted me, saying he had a great time and wanted to see me again soon. I happily agreed, and we made plans for a second date the following weekend. In the meantime, we continued to text and talk on the phone. He was just as engaging as he had been in person, and I found myself falling for him hard and fast. But that's when things started to get really weird. I started noticing that he knew things about me that I hadn't told him. Small details about my past, things I hadn't even shared with my closest friends. At first, I thought maybe I had mentioned them in passing and forgotten. But then it started happening more and more frequently. One day, he texted me, "Remember that time you got lost in the woods when you were a kid? You were so scared." I was floored. That was something that had happened when I was like 7 years old. I had never told anyone about it, not even my parents. I asked him how he knew, and he just replied, "I know a lot of things about you." That was when the alarm bells really started ringing. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he had somehow found my old social media accounts or hacked into my phone. But even those explanations seemed far-fetched. The following weekend, we went on our second date. This time, he took me to a secluded park outside of the city. It was beautiful, but also a little isolated. As we walked through the park, He started talking about his past. He told me stories about his childhood, his family, his previous relationships. But something about his stories felt off. They were filled with inconsistencies and contradictions. And he kept referring to people who, according to his previous stories, were dead. I started to feel increasingly uneasy. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. Plus, a part of me was still drawn to him, despite the red flags. As we walked deeper into the park, he stopped and turned to me. "You know," he said, his voice suddenly low and serious, "I've been waiting for you for a long time." I didn't know what to say. I just stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. He took a step closer to me, and his eyes seemed to glow with an unnatural light. "You re special," he said. "You re different from the others." "The others?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled, a slow, predatory smile that sent chills down my spine. "Yes," he said, "the others." He reached out and touched my face, his fingers cold and clammy. I tried to pull away, but I couldn't move. It was like I was frozen in place. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you. Not yet." He leaned in close, and I could feel his breath on my neck. "I just need something from you," he said. "Something you can't give me." And that's when I saw it. Behind him, standing in the shadows of the trees, were figures. Humanoid shapes, but distorted and grotesque. Their eyes were black and empty, and their mouths were stretched into silent screams. They were reaching for me, their skeletal fingers grasping at the air. I finally found my voice and screamed. I don't know what happened next. Everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground alone. The park was empty. The sun was setting, and the air was cold. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing, tried to make sense of what had happened. Was it a dream? A hallucination? Or was it real? I haven't been able to sleep properly ever since. I keep replaying the nightmare in my head, seeing those figures in the shadows, feeling Liam's cold fingers on my face. I deleted my Tinder profile, changed my number, and moved to a new apartment. I haven't seen or heard from Liam since that night, but I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching me, waiting for me. And I know, deep down, that he'll find me again. This is why I replay it over and over. I feel a weird sort of dread. He knows everything. Now I feel that my fear is building as each day passes. I just wish I could do something to feel safe. The worst part is that nobody believes me. When I try to tell them what happened, they just dismiss it as a bad dream or a panic attack. They tell me I need to relax and stop letting my imagination run wild. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know that Liam is not who he seemed to be. I am sharing this because I need someone to know. Someone to believe me. Because if I don't, I think I might actually go crazy. This story is my fear. This story is the fear that this is real. Okay, so after the whole Nathan thing, which I still get chills thinking about, by the way, I swore off Tinder. Like completely. Deleted the app, burned my phone, not really, but you get the picture. I was done with dating apps, done with meeting strangers, done with the whole damn thing. I threw myself into work, spent more time with my friends, and generally tried to forget that chapter of my life. But as they say, time heals all wounds, or at least dulls the pain enough that you start making questionable decisions again. About a year later, my best friend, Chloe, convinced me to give Tinder another shot. "Come on," she said. "Everyone's on it. You can't hide forever. Just be smarter this time. Meet in public. Tell me where you're going. Share your location. The whole 9 yards." I resisted at first, but she was relentless. And honestly, a small part of me missed the idea of dating. Not the creepy part, obviously, but the potential for connection, for finding someone cool and interesting. So, with a heavy dose of skepticism and a whole lot of safety precautions, I re-downloaded the app. I created a new profile, this time being extra careful about the photos I used and the information I shared. No more artsy, mysterious shots, just clear, normal pictures of me smiling. My bio was simple and straightforward. Librarian, bookworm, lover of bad puns. Looking for someone to explore the city with. I swiped cautiously, mostly left, only swiping right on guys who seemed genuinely nice and normal. And then I matched with Alex. He was different from Nathan, that was for sure. His profile was filled with pictures of him hiking, playing guitar, and hanging out with his dog. He seemed outdoorsy, friendly, and generally non-threatening. His bio said he was a software engineer and loved trying new restaurants. We started chatting, and he seemed perfectly normal, even a little boring, which, after my last experience, was exactly what I was looking for. We talked for a few weeks, mostly about our jobs, our hobbies, and our favorite books. He was easy to talk to, and I actually started to feel comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. After a few weeks of chatting, he suggested we meet up. I hesitated for a moment, those old anxieties bubbling up. But then I remembered Chloe's advice and decided to give it a chance. We agreed to meet for coffee at a busy cafe downtown. I told Chloe where I was going, shared my location with her, and even sent her a picture of Alex's profile. I was determined to do things right this time. The coffee date was fine. Alex was exactly as he seemed online. A bit nerdy, a bit awkward, but genuinely nice. We talked for a couple of hours, mostly about work and our shared love of dogs. There weren't any red flags, no weird vibes, nothing that made me want to run screaming. It was just a normal, pleasant date. At the end of the date, he walked me back to my car and asked if I wanted to go out again sometime. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I was ready for a second date, but he seemed so earnest and genuine, and I didn't want to be overly cautious. So I said yes. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. We went to a movie, we tried a new restaurant, we even went for a hike in the mountains. Alex was always polite, respectful, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. He seemed like the perfect guy. Too perfect, maybe. That's when things started to get weird. It started small. He would text me a lot, sometimes multiple times a day. He would always want to know what I was doing, who I was with, where I was going. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just really into me. But then it started to feel suffocating. He would get jealous if I mentioned spending time with other people, even my friends. He would always want to be the one I was with, the one I was talking to. He started calling me his girl after only a few weeks of dating, which felt way too soon. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was overreacting, but the feeling of unease grew stronger with each passing day. He started showing up at my apartment unannounced, just to say hi. He would wait outside my work, wanting to walk me to my car. He was always there, always watching. One night, I was out with Chloe, having dinner at a restaurant across town. I hadn't told Alex I was going out, wanting to have a night to myself, without him constantly checking in. Halfway through dinner, I looked up and saw him standing outside the restaurant, staring at me through the window. He hadn't said anything, hadn't tried to come inside. He just stood there, watching. I felt a chill run down my spine. Chloe saw him too. "That's intense," she said, her eyes wide with concern. I knew then that something was seriously wrong. I decided to end things with Alex. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't keep living like this, constantly feeling watched and controlled. I called him the next day and told him I needed to talk. We met at a park near my apartment. I tried to be gentle, explaining that I wasn't feeling a connection and that I thought we should see other people. He didn't take it well. He started arguing with me, telling me I was making a mistake, that he was the best thing that had ever happened to me. He said I was being unfair, that I was throwing away something special. I stood my ground, telling him that it wasn't working for me and that I needed space. He started to get angry, his voice rising, his face turning red. He accused me of lying, of seeing someone else. He said I was leading him on, that I had no right to break his heart. I started to get scared. I tried to walk away, but he grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and menacing. I yanked my arm away and ran. I didn't stop running until I was back in my apartment, locking the door behind me. I called Chloe, sobbing, telling her everything that had happened. She told me to call the police, but I was afraid. What if he retaliated? What if he came after me? Instead, I did what I should have done a long time ago. I blocked his number, deleted him from all my social media, and started avoiding places where I thought he might be. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I started getting strange phone calls. The caller ID was always blocked, and when I answered, there was no one there, just silence. Then, I started receiving emails with disturbing messages. They were vague, cryptic, but clearly meant to scare me. They mentioned things only Alex would know, details about our dates, things I had told him in confidence. I changed my phone number, created a new email address, and tightened my security. I was living in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if he was watching me. One night, I woke up to a strange noise outside my bedroom window. I peered through the blinds and saw a figure standing in the darkness, staring up at my window. I couldn't make out their face, but I knew it was him. I screamed and ran to the living room, grabbing my phone and calling the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. They searched the area, but they couldn't find him. I spent the rest of the night at Chloe's apartment, shaking with fear. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had to do something. The next day, I went to the police station and filed a restraining order against Alex. I told them everything that had happened, showed them the emails, described the figure I had seen outside my window. They took me seriously this time, launching a full investigation. It turned out that Alex had a history of stalking and harassment. He had done this before, with other women he had met online. The police were able to track him down and arrest him. He was charged with stalking and harassment, and eventually pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to several years in prison. I thought that would finally bring me peace of mind, but the experience had changed me. I was no longer the carefree, optimistic person I had been before. I was always on edge, always suspicious, always afraid that something bad was going to happen. Even now, years later, I still have nightmares about Alex. I still jump at strange noises. I still check my locks multiple times before bed. I haven't used Tinder since. I don't think I ever will again. I learned a valuable lesson from that experience, that you can never really know someone you meet online, no matter how normal they seem, and that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most harmless. What happened with Alex still haunts my dreams. It's a reminder that the internet can be a dangerous place, and that you always need to be careful who you trust. It also serves as a reminder of the importance of trusting your gut and cutting contact the moment something feels off, not months down the line like I did. The glow of my phone illuminated my face as I absent-mindedly swiped through Tinder. It was a mindless routine, a way to kill time on a Friday night when all my friends were out and I was stuck at home with a bad cold. Left, left, left. A guy holding a fish, always a no. Left again. Then, a profile stopped me in my tracks. Liam. Dark, brooding eyes, a jawline that could cut glass, and a bio that simply said, "Looking for someone to explore the city with." Intrigued, I swiped right. To my surprise, we matched instantly. He messaged me almost immediately, a simple, "Hey, how's your night going?" We chatted for a bit, and I found myself drawn to his quick wit and easygoing nature. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking about my hobbies, my favorite movies, and what I did for work. It was refreshing compared to the usual shallow conversations I had on the app. After an hour or so of chatting, he suggested we meet up. My initial reaction was hesitation. I was sick for one, and meeting someone from Tinder on a whim felt impulsive, even for me. But there was something about him that made me want to say yes. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely cool. Plus, the thought of staying home alone all night was depressing. "I'm actually fighting a cold," I typed. "But I'm also incredibly bored. Maybe a quick drink." "Perfect," he replied. "There's a cool little bar downtown, the Velvet Curtain. I'll meet you there in an hour." I agreed, scrambling to get ready. I threw on a comfortable but presentable outfit, dabbed on some concealer to hide my red nose, and spritzed on some perfume. As I headed out the door, I texted my best friend, Sarah, letting her know where I was going and who I was meeting. "Just in case," I wrote, trying to sound nonchalant. The Velvet Curtain was dimly lit and had a cozy atmosphere. Red velvet booths lined the walls, and a jazz band played softly in the corner. I spotted Liam standing near the bar, and he looked even better in person. He had a warm smile and an easygoing confidence that immediately put me at ease. "Hey," he said, pulling me into a hug. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, trying to ignore the butterflies fluttering in my stomach. We ordered drinks and settled into one of the booths. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about our families, our dreams, and our fears. He was a great listener, and I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't expected. He told me about his passion for photography, his travels through Europe, and his love for old movies. He seemed genuine, intelligent, and kind. As the night wore on, we ordered more drinks, and the bar started to empty out. The jazz band finished their set, and the bartender began to wipe down the counters. It was getting late, and I knew I should probably head home, but I didn't want the night to end. "So," Liam said, leaning closer, "what do you say we get out of here and go somewhere a little more interesting?" "Interesting how?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I know this cool little speakeasy a few blocks away," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "It's hidden, but it has the best cocktails in the city. Trust me, you'll love it." I hesitated. Going to a hidden speakeasy with a guy I just met on Tinder felt like something out of a horror movie. But the night had been so good so far, and I was feeling adventurous. Plus, I trusted my gut, and my gut was telling me that Liam was a good guy. "Okay," I said, "but if I get murdered, I'm blaming you." He laughed. "Deal. I promise I won't murder you." We left the velvet curtain and walked a few blocks to a seemingly abandoned alleyway. Liam led me to a nondescript door with a small peephole. He knocked a specific pattern, and after a moment, the door swung open, revealing a dimly lit staircase leading down into the darkness. The speakeasy was even cooler than I had imagined. The walls were covered in vintage posters, the furniture was mismatched and eclectic, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke and liquor. A bartender with a handlebar mustache greeted us with a nod, and Liam led me to a secluded corner booth. We ordered cocktails, and the conversation continued to flow. The music was louder here, a mix of blues and soul, and the atmosphere was electric. I was having a blast, feeling carefree and alive. Liam was charming, funny, and attentive. He made me feel like I was the only person in the room. As the night progressed, I started to feel a little dizzy. I chalked it up to the alcohol and the fact that I was still recovering from my cold. But the dizziness persisted, and I started to feel increasingly disoriented. "Are you okay?" Liam asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "You look a little pale." "I think I just need some fresh air," I said, standing up. "I'm going to go to the bathroom." I stumbled towards the bathroom, my head spinning. I splashed some water on my face, trying to clear my head. As I looked in the mirror, I noticed that my pupils were dilated and my skin was flushed. Something wasn't right. I went back to the booth, intending to tell Liam that I needed to go home, but he wasn't there. I looked around the speakeasy, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I started to feel a sense of panic rising in my chest. I pulled out my phone to call Sarah, but there was no signal. I tried again and again, but still nothing. I was completely cut off. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the speakeasy into darkness. A collective gasp swept through the room. Then, a single spotlight illuminated the small stage in the center of the room. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Liam, but he looked different. His eyes were cold and empty, and his smile was sinister. He was holding a microphone in his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice distorted and amplified, "welcome to the show." A wave of terror washed over me. This wasn't a date. This was something else entirely. Liam began to speak, his words rambling and nonsensical. He talked about darkness, about control, about the thrill of the hunt. He spoke of a game he liked to play, a game where he lured unsuspecting women into his web, and then, well, I didn't want to think about what came next. As he spoke, I noticed that the other patrons of the speakeasy were watching me with a strange, knowing look in their eyes. They weren't alarmed by Liam's bizarre behavior. In fact, they seemed to be enjoying it. It was then that I realized that they were all in on it. This wasn't just a speakeasy. It was a trap. I tried to get up and leave, but two burly men blocked my path. They were smiling, but their eyes were devoid of emotion. I was trapped. Liam continued his monologue, his voice growing louder and more menacing. He started to walk towards me, his eyes fixed on mine. I could see the madness in his gaze, the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. I was terrified. I didn't know what he was going to do, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. Suddenly, the door to the speakeasy burst open, and a group of police officers rushed inside. They stormed the stage, tackling Liam to the ground. The other patrons of the speakeasy scattered, trying to escape, but the police quickly apprehended them. I watched in shock as the scene unfolded. I couldn't believe what was happening. One of the officers approached me. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked. "We got an anonymous tip that something was going on here." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I don't know what's happening," I stammered. The officer explained that Liam was a known serial abuser, and the speakeasy was a front for his twisted games. He had been preying on women he met on Tinder, luring them to the speakeasy, and then the officer didn't elaborate, but I could imagine the horrors he had in store. I was taken to the police station, where I gave a statement. I learned that Sarah, my best friend, had been the one who called the police. She had gotten worried when she hadn't heard from me and had tracked my phone to the speakeasy. She had saved my life. The events of that night will stay with me forever. I was lucky to escape with my life, but the experience has left me scarred. I'll never trust a Tinder profile again, and I'll always be wary of strangers. It's been years since that night, and I'm still trying to heal. I go to therapy, and I'm slowly learning to trust again. But the memory of Liam's cold eyes and sinister smile will forever haunt my dreams. I'm sharing my story so that other women can learn from my mistakes. Be careful who you meet online. Trust your gut. And always let someone know where you are going. You never know when you might be walking into a trap. The night will stay with me. So I've always been a little anxious. I overthink things. I see patterns where there probably aren't any. And I'm generally just wired to expect the worst. But I always prided myself on being rational. I could usually talk myself down from the ledge, convince myself that my fears were unfounded. Then I met him on Tinder. I'd been using the app for a while, mostly as a distraction. Casual dates, pointless conversations, the occasional decent hookup. Nothing serious, nothing that stuck. I wasn't really looking for anything real, but a small part of me still hoped I'd stumble across someone worth keeping around. And then there was Alex. His profile was pretty standard, a few decent-looking pictures, a witty bio about enjoying hiking and craft beer. He seemed normal, maybe even a little boring, which, honestly, was a welcome change from some of the creeps I'd encountered. We matched, we chatted, and the conversation flowed easily. He was funny, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about our jobs, our families, our hobbies, all the usual getting-to-know-you stuff. He seemed normal. We met up for coffee a few days later, and the in-person vibe was just as good as the online one. He was even more attractive in person, with these intense blue eyes and a charming smile. We talked for hours, and I felt this weird sense of connection, like I'd known him for a lot longer than just a few days. We started seeing each other regularly. Dates turned into sleepovers, and sleepovers turned into weekends. We hiked, we went to concerts, we cooked dinner together. He met my friends, and they loved him. He met my family, and they were impressed. Everything was perfect, almost too perfect. That's when the little voice in the back of my head started whispering. The voice that told me things were moving too fast, that I was being naive, that this was all too good to be true. I tried to ignore it, chalked it up to my usual anxiety, but the voice kept getting louder. It started with small things. He was too attentive. He remembered every detail I told him, even the most insignificant ones. He seemed to anticipate my needs before I even voiced them. He was always available, always eager to spend time with me. It was flattering, sure, but also a little suffocating. Then there were the coincidences. We had an uncanny number of things in common. We liked the same obscure bands, the same weird movies, the same type of pizza. It felt like he was mirroring me, tailoring himself to fit my ideal partner. I started to feel like I was being watched. It wasn't a constant, overt feeling, but a subtle sense of unease, like someone was always just out of sight. I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, hear faint noises when I was alone. I wrote it off as stress, exhaustion, too much caffeine. I was probably just being paranoid. But then I started noticing things about his phone. He was incredibly protective of it. He always kept it face down. He never left it unattended, and he'd get visibly flustered if I even glanced at it. He claimed he was just private, but it felt like he was hiding something. One night, I was at his apartment while he was in the shower. His phone was lying on the coffee table, face down as usual. The temptation was overwhelming. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't resist. I picked up his phone and flipped it over. Nothing. No notifications, no missed calls, just a lock screen. I hesitated for a moment, then quickly swiped up and entered his passcode. It was ridiculously simple, 1234. I was in. My heart was pounding as I scrolled through his apps. Texts, emails, social media. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then I opened his Tinder. That's when I saw it. His profile was still active. He was still swiping. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. He was seeing other people. All this time, while he was telling me how special I was, how much he cared about me, he was still on Tinder, looking for someone else. I wanted to scream, to throw his phone against the wall, to confront him right then and there. But I didn't. I calmly closed the app, locked his phone, and put it back on the coffee table, face down. When he came out of the shower, I acted like nothing had happened. We spent the rest of the evening as usual, watching a movie, cuddling on the couch. But inside I was seething. I felt betrayed, stupid, and incredibly vulnerable. I couldn't bring myself to confront him directly. I was afraid of what he might say, what he might do. So I did what any rational, anxious person would do. I started digging. I spent the next few days obsessively researching him online. I scoured his social media. I ran his name through every search engine I could find. I even checked public records. I was looking for something, anything, that would explain his behavior, that would confirm my suspicions. And then I found it. It was a news article buried deep in the archives of a local newspaper. It was about a string of disappearances that had occurred in the area a few years ago. Young women, all single, all active on dating apps. They had vanished without a trace. The article mentioned a suspect, a man who had been questioned by the police, but never charged due to lack of evidence. The suspect's name was Alex. The article included a photo of him. It was an old photo, taken several years ago, but it was unmistakably him. He looked younger, thinner, but the eyes were the same, those intense, piercing blue eyes that had once captivated me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This couldn't be real. This had to be a mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I started piecing things together. The attentiveness, the coincidences, the protectiveness of his phone, the feeling of being watched, the disappearances, it all added up. I was dating a potential serial killer. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the police. I had no proof, just a hunch and a news article from years ago. He would deny everything, and I would look like a crazy, paranoid girlfriend. I knew I had to get out. I had to disappear. I had to protect myself. I started making plans. I packed a bag with essentials. I withdrew all my money from the bank. I contacted my family and told them I was going out of town for a while. I didn't tell them the truth, just that I needed a break. I knew he would notice something was wrong. He was too perceptive not to. But I hoped I could buy myself enough time to get away. The next time I saw him, I was a nervous wreck. I tried to act normal, but I could feel his eyes on me, studying me, trying to decipher my thoughts. We were at his apartment, watching a movie. He was sitting close to me, his arm around my shoulder. I could feel his breath on my neck, and it sent shivers down my spine. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice soft and concerned. "Yeah, everything's fine," I lied, forcing a smile. He didn't look convinced. "You seem distant." "Just tired," I said. "I didn't sleep well last night." He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on me. "I understand." The rest of the evening was excruciating. Every touch, every word, felt like a threat. I couldn't wait to get out of there. Finally, it was time for me to go home. He walked me to my car, his hand lingering on my arm. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "Okay," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. As I drove away, I looked in my rearview mirror. He was standing on the sidewalk, watching me. His face was unreadable, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. I didn't go home that night. I drove straight to a motel on the outskirts of town. I checked in under a fake name and turned off my phone. I didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I packed my bag and drove to the airport. I bought a one-way ticket to another state, a place where he would never find me. I haven't seen or heard from him since. I changed my name. I cut off contact with most of my friends and family. I started a new life. It's been difficult, lonely, and terrifying, but I know it was the right thing to do. Sometimes I still have nightmares. I dream about his eyes, his smile, his touch. I dream about the women who disappeared, their faces forever etched in my mind. I'll never know for sure if he was responsible for their disappearances. I'll never know if I was next. But I know that I was right to be paranoid. My anxiety saved my life. Now I am working on my anxiety to not let him win, to not let him take my paranoia from me. I never thought I'd be that person, the one with the online dating horror story that makes everyone cringe and say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I always considered myself pretty savvy, Street smart, good at reading people. But Tinder really threw me for a loop. This happened last summer. I was bored, freshly single, and feeling like I needed a little adventure. My friends were all coupled up, and I was tired of being the third wheel. So, like any self-respecting millennial, I downloaded Tinder. Swiping felt like a game at first. Judge, reject, maybe a fleeting moment of interest. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just someone to grab a drink with, maybe go on a hike. Casual, low-key, no pressure. Then I matched with him. His name was Alex. His profile was intriguing, not in a conventionally attractive way. He wasn't ripped or polished. He looked kind of ordinary, but his bio was what caught my eye. It just said, looking for someone to explore the unconventional with. That sounded interesting, right? Different. I was tired of guys who just wanted to talk about sports and their jobs. He seemed like he had a bit of depth. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly engaging. He didn't ask the usual boring questions. He wanted to know about my fears, my dreams, the things that kept me up at night. He had a way of making me feel seen, understood. It was flattering, even a little intoxicating. We talked for a couple of weeks, and he suggested we meet up. He suggested a specific place, which I didn't know very well, but I didn't want to seem scared or uninteresting. He mentioned a pop-up carnival that was going to be in town. It was that same weekend, and he said it would be fun to explore the fun house. I was hesitant, but I figured, what the hell? It was a public place, plenty of people around. I told a couple of friends where I was going and who I was meeting, sent them his picture, the usual precautions. I met him at the entrance to the carnival. He was taller than I expected, with intense eyes that seemed to hold a lot of unspoken thoughts. He was wearing a black leather jacket and jeans, and he had this quiet intensity about him that was both alluring and a little unnerving. We walked around for a bit, playing some of the games, grabbing some greasy food. It was okay. He wasn't exactly Mr. Personality, but he was polite and attentive. The carnival was incredibly crowded, the air thick with the smell of popcorn and the sounds of screaming children. I was starting to think I'd made a mistake. It wasn't really my scene, and I wasn't sure I was clicking with Alex the way I thought I would. Then he suggested we go into the fun house. I hesitated. Fun houses always freaked me out a little. The disorienting mirrors, the claustrophobic hallways, the creepy clowns. But I didn't want to seem boring or scared, so I agreed. We stepped inside, and immediately I felt a chill run down my spine. The air was thick and heavy, and the only light came from flickering strobe lights that cast bizarre shadows on the walls. The music was a cacophony of distorted sounds and eerie laughter. Alex seemed to be enjoying himself, navigating the maze with a strange sense of confidence. I, on the other hand, was completely disoriented. I kept bumping into mirrors, getting lost in dead ends, feeling increasingly claustrophobic. After a while, I realized I couldn't see Alex anymore. Alex, I called out, my voice barely audible above the din. No response. I started to panic. I wandered through the maze, calling his name, but all I heard was the echoing laughter and the distorted music. The fun house seemed to be getting more and more twisted, the hallways narrower, the mirrors more distorting. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. I stumbled upon a room filled with mannequins dressed as clowns. Their painted smiles seemed to mock me, their eyes following me as I moved. I felt like I was being watched, judged. I spun around to leave, and there he was, Alex, standing in the doorway, his eyes glinting in the strobe light. "Lost?" he asked, his voice low and almost predatory. I didn't like the way he was looking at me. It wasn't playful or amused. It was intense. "I can't find my way out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I can help you," he said. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong, almost painful. He started leading me through the maze, but instead of heading towards the exit, he led me deeper and deeper into the fun house. The hallways seemed to be getting narrower, the mirrors more distorted. I felt like I was being pulled into a dark, twisted world. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just kept walking, pulling me along with him. We reached a room I hadn't seen before. It was small and circular, with padded walls and a single bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room was a chair. It looked like something out of a horror movie. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go of my hand. What is this place? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He finally stopped walking and turned to face me. His eyes were dark and empty, like there was nothing behind them. This is where we explore the unconventional, he said. My blood ran cold. I knew, in that moment, that I was in serious danger. I tried to scream, but my voice was caught in my throat. He pushed me towards a chair. I struggled, but he was too strong. He forced me into the chair and started tying my hands to the armrests. I was terrified. What are you doing? I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. He didn't answer. He just kept tying me up, his movements precise and deliberate. When he was finished, I was completely immobilized. I couldn't move my hands or my feet. I was trapped. He stepped back and looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange mix of fascination and something else, something I couldn't quite identify. Now, he said, his voice barely a whisper, we can begin. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a knife. It wasn't a large knife, but it was sharp and glinted menacingly in the light. I started screaming, begging him to let me go. But he didn't seem to hear me. He just stood there, staring at me, the knife in his hand. I closed my eyes, waiting for the worst, but it didn't come. Instead, I heard a shout, a loud, angry shout. I opened my eyes and saw a security guard standing in the doorway, pointing a flashlight at us. Alex froze, his eyes widening in surprise. The security guard rushed towards us and grabbed Alex, wrestling the knife away from him. I started crying, my body shaking uncontrollably. The security guard called the police, and they arrived a few minutes later. They arrested Alex and took me to the hospital. I was physically unharmed, but I was emotionally traumatized. I spent the next few weeks in therapy, trying to process what had happened. The police investigation revealed that Alex had a history of mental illness and had been stalking me online for weeks before we met. He had planned the entire thing, carefully selecting the location and the time. He even had a history of similar behavior with other women he'd met online. I was lucky. I managed to escape with my life, but the experience changed me forever. I'm now incredibly cautious about who I meet online, and I always make sure to take extra precautions. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust someone completely again, and I'll definitely never go to a fun house again. What started as a desire for a little adventure turned into a terrifying nightmare, and it all started with a simple swipe right on Tinder. The thought still sends shivers down my spine. It's a reminder that there are dangerous people out there, hiding behind seemingly normal profiles, waiting for their opportunity to strike. And sometimes, the unconventional can be deadly. All right, so you are never going to believe this. Seriously, if someone told me this story, I'd be like, yeah, okay, buddy, whatever. But it happened. To me. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It all started, like so many questionable decisions in my life, with Tinder. I was fresh off a pretty brutal breakup, feeling sorry for myself, and convinced that the only way to move on was to dive headfirst into the chaotic world of dating apps. Swiping felt like a mindless distraction, a way to temporarily forget about the ex who still haunted my dreams. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, maybe just some casual flings to boost my ego and prove that I was still, desirable. So, I set my age range pretty wide and started swiping right on anyone who looked vaguely interesting. That's where I messed up, I think. Letting my guard down, getting careless. I matched with this guy named Julian. His profile was pretty standard. A couple of decent-looking photos, a witty bio about his love for craft beer and hiking, and a claim that he was just looking for good vibes. Seemed harmless enough, right? We started chatting, and he was surprisingly engaging. He wasn't just throwing out the usual cheesy pickup lines. He actually asked me about my interests, my job, my thoughts on the latest season of Stranger Things, a major plus in my book. We had a lot in common, or at least that's what it seemed like at the time. After a few days of constant texting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated for a bit. Part of me was still scarred from the breakup and terrified of putting myself out there again. But another part of me was intrigued by Julian's charm and genuinely wanted to see if our online chemistry would translate into real life. So I said yes. We met at this cute little coffee shop in my neighborhood. He was even more attractive in person, tall with these piercing blue eyes and a disarming smile. We talked for hours, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. I started to think that maybe, Just maybe. Tinder hadn't led me completely astray. We went on a few more dates over the next couple of weeks. We explored different parts of the city, went to art museums, and even tried a ridiculously spicy Thai restaurant, a mistake we both regretted. I was starting to feel something for him, something real. It was scary, but also exhilarating. Then things started to get weird. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. He would ask me strange questions about my past, about my family, about things I hadn't even mentioned on Tinder. He seemed to know more about me than he should have, and it made me uneasy. One night, we were at my apartment, watching a movie. He went to the bathroom, and when he came back, he picked up a framed photo of me and my best friend from college. "She's cute," he said. "What's her name again?" I told him her name, but something felt off. I knew for a fact that I had never shown him that photo before. How did he know I had a best friend from college? How did he know what she looked like? I tried to brush it off, chalked it up to coincidence, but the feeling of unease lingered. Then, the stalking started. I would catch him outside my apartment building, just standing there, watching. He would claim he was in the neighborhood, or just wanted to surprise me. But I knew he was lying. The look in his eyes was unsettling, possessive. He started showing up at my work, bringing me lunch or flowers. At first, it seemed sweet, but then it became suffocating. My co-workers started noticing, whispering behind my back. I felt like I was being watched constantly. I tried to talk to him about it, told him that I needed space, that he was making me uncomfortable. But he would just brush it off, tell me I was being paranoid, that he was just trying to show me how much he cared. He wouldn't leave me alone. I started avoiding him, screening his calls, ignoring his texts. But he always found a way to get to me. He knew my routine, my schedule, everything. One night, I was walking home from work when I realized I was being followed. I turned around, and there he was, Julian, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. I panicked and started running. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, but he was gaining on me. I could hear his footsteps behind me, getting closer and closer. I finally reached my apartment building and fumbled with my keys, desperately trying to unlock the door. He grabbed me from behind, his grip tight on my arm. "Let me go." I screamed, struggling to break free. He just laughed, a cold, chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You can't get rid of me that easily," he said, his voice low and menacing. I managed to kick him in the shin, and he stumbled back, giving me enough time to unlock the door and rush inside. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I called the police, but they said there was nothing they could do unless he actually threatened me or physically harmed me. They told me to get a restraining order, but that would take time, and I was terrified of what he might do in the meantime. I spent the next few days living in fear, afraid to leave my apartment, constantly looking over my shoulder. I felt like I was trapped in a horror movie, and I didn't know how to escape. Then, one night, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a picture of me, sleeping in my bed. The message said, "I'm always watching." That was it. I completely lost it. I packed a bag, grabbed my cat, and drove to my parents' house in the middle of the night. I didn't tell them everything, just that I was having some trouble with a guy I met on Tinder. I spent a few weeks at my parents' house, trying to recover from the trauma. I got a restraining order against Julian, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media accounts. I felt like I had to completely disappear to protect myself. Eventually, I moved back to the city, but I found a new apartment in a different neighborhood. I'm still paranoid, always on edge, but I'm slowly starting to feel safe again. The police never caught Julian. He just vanished. I don't know where he is or what he's doing, and that's what scares me the most. He could be anywhere, watching, waiting. I'll never use Tinder again. I'm done with online dating. It's just not worth the risk. You really never know who you're talking to, who's behind that profile picture. Some people are just not who they say they are. So yeah, that's my Tinder horror story. Believe it or not, it's all true. Be careful out there, people. You won't believe what can happen to you. Swipe at your own risk. The glow of the phone screen illuminated my face, the familiar swipe motion almost a reflex. Left, right pause. He wasn't my usual type. A little older, maybe late 30s, with a profile that was different. Instead of the typical gym selfies and group shots with buddies, his photos were all black and white, artsy shots of landscapes, empty streets, and one close-up of his intensely blue eyes. His bio simply read, "Looking for someone to explore the hidden corners of the city with." Intriguing. I swipe right. A few minutes later, the "It's a match" notification popped up. A small thrill shot through me. After weeks of boring conversations and dead-end dates, someone who seemed genuinely interesting. We started chatting, and it was unlike anything I'd experienced on Tinder before. He wasn't trying to be overtly sexual or immediately push for a date. He asked about my favorite authors, my thoughts on urban decay, and if I believed in ghosts. We talked for hours, late into the night, about everything and nothing. His name was Elias. He was a photographer and writer, drawn to the overlooked and forgotten parts of the city. He described himself as a collector of stories, someone who found beauty in the mundane and the macabre. Part of me knew this was probably too good to be true, a carefully constructed persona designed to lure someone in. But I was drawn to him anyway. His words were like a dark melody, pulling me deeper into his world. After a week of intense messaging, he suggested we meet, not for a typical dinner or drinks, but for a walk through an abandoned part of the city he knew well. He promised to show me something unique and unforgettable. Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was a Tuesday night. I told a friend where I was going, shared Elias's profile, and sent her my location, just in case. The meeting spot was an old industrial park on the outskirts of the city, a place I'd never been before. It was eerily quiet, the only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the occasional screech of a rat. Elias was already there when I arrived, leaning against a rusted gate, a cigarette in his hand. He looked different in person than in his photos. Taller, more imposing, with a face that seemed both handsome and haunted. His eyes, that striking shade of blue, seemed to pierce right through me. "You made it," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I was starting to think you were a figment of my imagination." I laughed nervously, almost chickened out, to be honest. "This place is creepy." He smiled a slow, unsettling grin. "That's the point. Come on, I have something to show you." He led me through the gate, into the heart of the abandoned industrial park. The buildings were crumbling, covered in graffiti and broken windows. The air was thick with the smell of decay and rust. It felt like we were stepping into a forgotten world. As we walked, Elias told me stories about the history of the place, about the factory workers who had once toiled there, about the economic forces that had led to its demise. He spoke with a passion and a sadness that was both captivating and disturbing. He took me to an old warehouse, its roof partially collapsed, the interior filled with debris and shadows. "This used to be a textile factory," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "They say the ghosts of the workers still roam these halls, their fingers forever stained with dye." I shivered, not entirely from the cold. "You really believe in that stuff?" He shrugged. "I believe in the stories people tell, and these walls are filled with them." He led me deeper into the warehouse, to a dark corner where a single shaft of moonlight illuminated a strange object on the floor. It was a mannequin, its limbs twisted at unnatural angles, its face obscured by a tattered piece of cloth. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "A relic," Elias said, "a reminder of what we've lost." He reached out and pulled the cloth away from the mannequin's face. I gasped. The mannequin's face was not made of plastic or plaster, but of human skin. Pale, decaying human skin, stretched taut over the mannequin's features. The eyes were missing, the mouth frozen in a silent scream. I recoiled in horror, stumbling backwards. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I screamed, my voice echoing through the warehouse. "This isn't funny. This is sick." Elias just stood there, watching me, a strange smile on his face. "Don't you see?" he said, his voice low and hypnotic. "This is beauty. This is truth. This is what we've become." I turned and ran, desperate to escape the warehouse, desperate to get away from Elias and his macabre world. But he was faster than me. He caught me before I reached the exit, his hand gripping my arm with a strength that surprised me. "Where do you think you're going?" he said, his voice a menacing growl. "We're not finished yet." I struggled to break free, but his grip was too tight. He dragged me back into the warehouse, towards the mannequin, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Something truly unforgettable." He pulled a knife from his pocket, a long, gleaming blade that glinted in the moonlight. I screamed, a primal scream of terror. I knew what he was going to do. He was going to kill me, right there, in the abandoned warehouse, and turn me into another grotesque work of art. But then, something unexpected happened. A loud crash echoed through the warehouse. A group of teenagers, drawn by our screams, had broken into the building. They saw what was happening and started yelling, throwing rocks and debris at Elias. He was startled, momentarily distracted. I seized the opportunity and broke free from his grasp. I ran as fast as I could, out of the warehouse, out of the industrial park, not stopping until I reached the main road. I flagged down a passing car and begged the driver to take me to the nearest police station. The police took my statement, searched the industrial park, but Elias was gone. The mannequin was gone too. There was no evidence of the crime, no witnesses, just my word against his. They treated me with suspicion, suggested I might have been hallucinating or exaggerating. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what Elias was capable of. I moved out of the city, changed my number, deleted my social media accounts. I tried to erase him from my life, but he was always there, lurking in the shadows, haunting my dreams. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face, his cold blue eyes, his unsettling smile. I see the mannequin, its human skin stretched taut over its grotesque features. I hear his voice, whispering in my ear, "This is beauty. This is truth. This is what we've become." I still use Tinder, sometimes. It feels like some strange addiction. I know I should stay away from it, but I can't. I'm always searching for him, scanning every profile, hoping to catch a glimpse of his face. I know it's insane. I know I should move on, but I can't. He's out there somewhere, collecting stories, searching for his next victim, and I can't rest until he's brought to justice, even if it means facing him again. Even if it means confronting the darkness that still lurks within me, the darkness that drew me to him in the first place. Tinder, a harmless dating app or a gateway to hell? I still don't know, but I do know that my life will never be the same. I wish I could scrub the whole thing from my memory, bleach it out of my brain until it's nothing but a blurry, nonsensical mess. But some things stick, burrow deep under your skin and fester, like a splinter you can't quite reach, no matter how hard you try. This was one of those things. And it all started with Tinder. I wasn't actively looking for anything serious, not really. Newly single after a messy breakup, mostly just swiping to kill time, a distraction from the gaping hole in my life. I'd had a few casual hookups, some decent conversations, the usual Tinder fare. Then I matched with Liam. He seemed normal enough at first. Decent photos, not overly filtered or posed, just him. A hiking picture, one with a dog, another laughing with friends. His bio was witty, self-deprecating, the kind of thing designed to make you think he didn't take himself too seriously. We chatted for a few days, the conversation flowing easily, a comfortable rhythm. He was funny, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. I actually looked forward to his messages, a welcome change from the usual vapid exchanges. He suggested meeting up for coffee. I hesitated. I'd been burned before, catfished, ghosted, the whole 9 yards. But something about Liam felt different. I agreed, telling myself it was just coffee. No pressure, no expectations. The coffee date went surprisingly well. He was even more charming in person, with a disarming smile and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and the time just flew by. I felt a genuine connection, a spark I hadn't felt in a long time. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Dinners, movies, hikes in the park. He was attentive, thoughtful, always making an effort to make me feel special. He listened when I talked, remembered the little details, and genuinely seemed to care about my feelings. It was nice. Almost too nice. I found myself falling for him, hard and fast. It scared me, the intensity of it, the vulnerability. I tried to hold back, to protect myself, but it was no use. He had me completely hooked. He started staying over at my place more often. At first, it was just a few nights a week. Then gradually it became every night. He practically moved in, his things slowly taking over my apartment. I didn't mind, not really. It felt right, comfortable, like he belonged there. Then things started to change. Subtle shifts at first, almost imperceptible. He became more possessive, wanting to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing at all times. He'd check my phone when I wasn't looking, scrolling through my messages, my contacts. He'd question me about my friends, my exes, anyone who had ever been a part of my life. I tried to brush it off, to tell myself it was just insecurity, that he was afraid of losing me. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was control. He was trying to control me. He started isolating me from my friends. He'd make excuses for why I couldn't go out with them, or he'd pick fights with me right before, making me feel guilty for even wanting to leave. He'd tell me they didn't really care about me, that they were just jealous of our relationship. I started to believe him. I started to pull away from my friends, spending more and more time with him, isolating myself in my apartment. I felt trapped, suffocated, but I didn't know how to get out. The verbal abuse started soon after. Subtle jabs at first, disguised as jokes, then gradually escalating to outright insults, name-calling, and belittling comments. He'd criticize my appearance, my intelligence, my personality. He'd tell me I was worthless, that no one else would ever want me. I started to believe him. My self-esteem plummeted, my confidence shattered. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. Then came the physical stuff. It started small. A rough grab of my arm during an argument, a shove against the wall. Then it escalated. Slaps, punches, kicks. He always apologized afterwards, showering me with guilt and promises that it would never happen again. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he loved me, that he didn't mean to hurt me. But it kept happening, over and over again, each time worse than the last. I was living in a constant state of fear, terrified of what he might do next. I became a shell of my former self, a broken, empty husk. One day, he asked me about Tinder. It had been months since I deleted the app. He had been using my phone and saw the deleted apps. I had told him before I had met someone, but he wanted to know who I talked to. He wanted to see the messages. I explained to him I didn't have it anymore and I deleted it. He got angry and began shoving me around asking why I deleted it and why I didn't tell him about it. He then began to slap me, with blood coming out of my mouth, and yelled at me to tell him. After about 20 minutes of this, I told him everything. He got angrier and began to punch me repeatedly. I knew I had to get out. I knew that if I stayed, he would eventually kill me. I started making a plan. I knew I couldn't leave while he was there. I had to wait for him to leave for work. It was risky, but it was my only chance. One morning, while he was in the shower, I packed a bag with a few essentials, clothes, money, my passport. I wrote a note, telling him that I was leaving and that I never wanted to see him again. I didn't say anything about the abuse, afraid of what he might do if he found me. When he left for work, I grabbed my bag and ran. I ran as fast as I could, not knowing where I was going, just knowing that I had to get away. I ended up at a women's shelter, a place where I could feel safe and protected. I stayed there for a few weeks, slowly piecing my life back together. I started therapy, working through the trauma and the abuse. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when I felt like I would never be whole again. But I kept going, one step at a time. I eventually moved to a new city, started a new job, made new friends. I built a new life for myself, one free from fear and abuse. But the scars remain. The memories still haunt me. I'll never forget what happened that day. I'll never forget Liam. I still have trouble trusting people. I'm always afraid that the same thing will happen again, that I'll fall for someone who will turn out to be a monster. I've tried dating again, but it's always a disaster. I'm too guarded, too afraid to let anyone get close. I know I need to move on, to let go of the past, but it's easier said than done. I wish I could erase him from my memory, but I know that's not possible. He'll always be a part of me, a dark shadow lurking in the corners of my mind, all because of a swipe right on Tinder. I want to warn every other person of the dangers of these apps, but I know some people don't listen. Just know that it is better to be safe than sorry, and the risks of dating apps are huge. I wish I knew that then.